Join me today as I interview Susan Sucher, our new Local Societies Coordinator, to find out what a Local Societies Coordinator does and maybe how you can start a local society. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I'm Grettelyn, your host, and I'm joined today by the lovely Susan Sucher, you might know her as the domestic empress. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hi, Grettelyn. I'm doing great.
Good. It's great to have you back on, and it's fun because Susan works for the society as well now, so I get to see her a lot, which is always fun.
Definitely.
We probably spend a little too much time talking about our kids and things, but it's great. Anyway, so fun to have you as part of the team, and to have you back on the podcast. So for those people who are watching who don't know, would you mind just giving yourself a little background here, introduce yourself, and maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing now for the society?
Okay. Yes, my name's Susan Sucher. I recently joined the society in August of 2023 as the local societies coordinator. I am a mom of 9. We live outside of Baltimore, Maryland. I am the president of my own local Chesterton society, the Chesapeake chapter of the Society of G.K. Chesterton. I love my Chestertonians. We meet once a month in my home. And if you're interested, you can find us on our local society finder, which is on chesterton.org. If you're interested in starting your own society, I'll just put the plug right up front. You can go to chesterton.org, click on local societies, send me an email, and I'll help you get things started. I guess that's my introduction. We can talk a little bit more about all of the rest of it, but that's who I am, wife to Greg, mother of 9, Gilbert columnist, and my new role is the local societies coordinator for the Society of G.K. Chesterton.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you in that position. My mother-in-law, Vicki Darkey, was
yes
for many years, and then she had to step back. So it's wonderful to have someone, especially like you, who's very energetic and responsive. I don't know. I hope.
Yeah, they're big shoes to fill. And she also is the foundress of the Francis Chesterton Rosary League, along with Nancy Carpentier Brown. So I've got a big legacy to continue there. And I'm really excited. We can talk too about some of the things that are happening with the Francis Chesterton Rosary League to continue the great work that they started. So
yeah. We love that for sure. But why don't you first tell us some of the things that you are looking forward to doing to help local societies kind of go to the next level, and really to give them the support that they need?
Well, our local societies, first of all, what is a local society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton? Basically, it's a group of friends. It's people who meet in a home, in a pub, in a church basement, anywhere you decide regularly to discuss the works of G.K. Chesterton and then how you might apply them to your life. It's a chance for hospitality. It's a chance for community. And what I'm hoping to do is to help people found these local societies in their communities. I'd love to see more in universities. I'd love to see local societies associated with our Chesterton schools, network schools, to help parents. The parents are sometimes jealous because we have such an amazing curriculum with the Chesterton Schools Network. They're like, I wish I would have had that when I was that age. Well, this is their opportunity to dip their toes in it at an adult level. At a pace that's more appropriate for somebody who is not a full-time student, to expose themselves to these big ideas. So they fit in really nicely with schools. They fit in really nicely with universities. They fit in every parish, I think, should have a Chesterton society. The sky's the limit, And then, of course, the sister organization is the Francis Chesterton Rosary League. So these groups can meet weekly or monthly. The point is to pray the rosary for the needs of the apostolate, for the members of the Francis Chesterton Rosary League, and to really support the society and the schools network with prayer. going to our Blessed Mother, that, G.K. Chesterton, even before he was a Christian, even before he was a Catholic, the Blessed Mother was always there with him,
Mm.
his entire life. And so with that model in mind, we are bringing all of our petitions to the Blessed Mother. And, the Francis Chesterton Rosary League provides an apparatus to do that, provides a way that we can get together in the spirit of G.K. Chesterton, and join him in asking the Mother of God to bless our efforts and to help bring people to her Son.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wonderful. So, great. So are there, I know you've done at least one like information session, for people who want to start a local society. Tell me a little bit about that. Some of the fun things you've found, people you've met in that.
Oh, it's great. So we have, very experienced leaders who have been running Chesterton societies for 30 years. We have people who are brand new and super excited, but haven't yet had their first meeting. We've talked about our Chesterton Digital Library. That's at library.chesterton.org. I'm sure all of these things are going to be in the program notes at the end.
Yes. Yes.
So don't worry about writing it down. But that is a phenomenal resource where people can curate essays to discuss. They can look for more information. They can put Chesterton's work. They find a quote. They can put it in context to understand the larger view of what Chesterton was talking about. We've done an amazing job over the last 20 years to curate that information, to collect it, to proofread it, to edit it. In fact, we did an information session for our local society leaders on the Chesterton Digital Library. So leaders could join. Leaders can now request a copy of that to get, if they weren't able to join us live, and to get sort of specialized training. So that's part of what my job is, to give the inside scoop of the society and some of our resources, and just provide additional training. If you have a difficulty as a leader figuring out how to get your message across in the parish bulletin, or if you need some support coming up with ideas, or you need to brainstorm, or you'd like me to email the local community and find out, do we have any supporters in the area who might be interested in meeting, those types of liaison things I can do. And then another role is I'd like to help facilitate relationships between Chesterton schools and the local societies. So we have Chestertonians who come to local society meetings are multifaceted, intelligent, interesting individuals with a plethora of talents. And so I would like to connect those individuals with the Chesterton schools, to support them, to perhaps provide a seminar, to, go to the gala and see the amazing work that our students are doing, to be sort of like a booster club for the Chesterton schools, because they really have a similar mission, which is, to bring people to Jesus Christ through the work of G.K. Chesterton. So really, it is one mission, the mission of the local societies and the mission of the Chesterton Schools Network. Slightly different methods, but definitely one unified mission. So
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's nice to have that kind of community support, both
absolutely.
for the schools and for the societies. They need to talk to each other.
Right. And, the Chesterton Schools Network has a motto of cultura vitae, a culture of life. And really, it's great because we have faculty super committed to that. And we've got parents and we've got students, but it's so beautiful to see this sort of enveloping community to provide that, additional support, because in society today, very often students don't see support for those types of values. And it's really great that we can provide that type of support for them.
Amen. For sure. So Susan provided a lovely essay that she found on the Chesterton Digital Library website.
Yes.
Let me pull it up so I get the name correct. It's called The Extension of the Family from the Illustrated London News in 1927. So that's post-conversion, right?
It is.
Okay. Just some context. It helps to, although I agree with you. I think there's a lot of things you can't tell. You're like post-conversion,
right.
pre-conversion. he's been Catholic the whole time. Anyway.
Well, he really has. I mean, I think it's remarkable that, Monsignor Knox credits his conversion to G.K. Chesterton's work
Mm.
to Catholicism, to orthodoxy in part. And then Knox brought Chesterton into the church a, a while later. So it was sort of a leapfrog into the church, him
Yeah.
and Monsignor Knox. And I think that's beautiful because, Chesterton just really shows us that it is a journey and it's a continual conversion,
Mm.
not just a one moment and then we're done. So I
Yeah.
think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and it's kind of like falling in love, right? You sort of
Mm,
spend a lot of time with somebody and you really like them, and then suddenly you're like, oh,
yes,
maybe I'm in love. And
right.
it's a little bit like that with Chesterton and Catholicism, I think.
Definitely. And even after you make the commitment, you can fall deeper in love. That's the ideal, right? And I think that Chesterton continued to fall deeper in love
Mm.
throughout his life, and that's a goal for all of us
Mm.
to continue to fall deeper in love with our
Amen.
Lord. Yeah.
Well, this
So
we're already starting our little society meeting right now.
yeah, we are. So a society meeting, that's what we do. We get around and we talk about an essay. I suggest essays for beginning local societies because the time commitment, everybody's busy. You can't read The Everlasting Man in 1 month and then have a meaningful discussion about the entire thing. That's just too much. So I have discussed novels and books in our local society meetings, but we've usually had to break them up into several sessions. So when you're first starting out, or even when you need a lighter month, let's say May, everybody has first communions and graduations, and May is a crazy month. So a couple of essays are a
Mm.
great way to have a meaningful, deep discussion without overwhelming local society members with one more chore.
Mm.
We want this to be something that enriches your life, not something that adds a burden. So I chose this extension of the family for our little discussion here because it talks about hospitality. And it also has a piece in the beginning which talks about discussing things with people you may not always agree with. And this is one of the wonderful things about our local societies. And one of the wonderful things about Chesterton's charism in particular was that he was able to disagree with people without becoming their enemy. So people like Shaw, people like Wells, he had disagreements, but he never became their enemy. He was able to, really strongly disagree and remain friends. And I think that's a model for all of us, especially nowadays. So he
Wonderful.
begins by he begins by talking about Edith Shackleton, who apparently is some sort of gloomy booster of birth control. So clearly he disagrees with her in some ways, but points out ways that he can agree with her. And I think that's really important that he gives us this model of, I can agree with one small part of something, and that doesn't mean I endorse everything. Sometimes we cancel people by association these days, which I
Mm.
think is a really narrow way of treating people. Oh, he one time agreed with this person who has a reprehensible belief. Well, that's not really treating people fairly. And I think Chesterton does a good job of helping us find the good in people,
Mhm.
even people who haven't come all the way on their journey yet. So,
Truly, and I think it's important to remember too that Chesterton in particular really like tried to get to know people. So
mhm,
especially with these public personalities, like he's talking about in this essay, that's their public personality, right? Is it quite who they are? I know that you get into muddy water here because you don't want to say that you can do one thing in public and one thing in private, but people
right,
do act differently, and they might have things that they do kind of keep hidden that are maybe even things you can agree with, things that are better. So it's just interesting that he can find that, and he can pull that out, and he's very interested in the person, I guess is what I'm trying
right.
to say. And he's trying to meet them where they are and help them, and that's just so cool. I love that about Chesterton.
Yeah, and that's the virtue of hope, right? That
Mm.
there's hope for everybody.
Mhm.
Even the most hardened sinner. That's our faith, that we believe that conversion is possible, and it certainly isn't. is less likely if all you hear is condemning voices and you don't have anybody who's willing to dialogue with you or treat you with humanity. And Chesterton's a really good example of that. So in the second paragraph of this, I just love this. So there's this idea of fashion versus principle, and the
Yeah.
idea that sometimes we will even moralize things like fashion. And I think that's very interesting, when looking at trends, if I show my ankles, will I cause a man to sin? Like these types of ideas. I mean, they're coming back kind of full bore right now. I've seen that in certain aspects of the Twitterverse, or I guess it's the Xverse now. I don't know, but it's really interesting. But I think he characterizes the argument as this. I'm quoting from the middle of the second paragraph. It says, their argument almost invariably amounts to this: the Victorian girl was weak and cowardly because she wore ringlets and crinolines when ringlets and crinolines were fashionable. The modern girl is independent and individual because she wears shingled hair and short skirts when shingled hair and short skirts are fashionable. And at the end of the paragraph, he says, as a matter of fact, of course, both assumptions are false and absurdly unphilosophical. Ideas like truth and fidelity remain to be judged on their own merits, without reference to the external modes of the age, as the multiplication table or the theory of cause and effect remains, in spite of any alteration in our taste in hats. A man's head will continue to calculate that 2 and 2 make 4, and that cause precedes effect, however rapid and varied be the succession of hats on his head.
Mm.
So, it's so plain. His wisdom is common sense,
Mm.
and it's so plain, but it's so beautiful the way he can point these things out in a humorous way.
It's great because it's not like, here's why you're wrong. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it is very humorous. And I think if you look at it that way, I definitely, when I first read this morning, I thought to myself, oh, I do that. Like I've definitely been that shallow person and made that kind of analogy before. And that's not right. Like it's fun to kind of be pointed out by G.K. Chesterton sometimes. Oh, okay, thanks. I'm never going to do that again. Hopefully, but yeah, it's a very shrewd insight and very well said.
Yeah, and it definitely gives us a chance to examine ourselves, in light of some of these timeless truths, because he's writing this back in 1927. And here we are almost 100 years later, finding this relevant to our current life. And that's the beauty of his writing, is that there is a large philosophical element to it. And so, without being formal and stuffy, I don't know, a lot of the philosophy stuff I've read is kind of like, it's good bedtime reading material, like, but it's like, how
Yeah.
much better is philosophy that's sort of hidden in humor that we can then apply to our lives? I mean, what's the point of knowing what's true if you can't really apply it?
Right.
So I
And
think,
this section too, I think is really an appeal to the democracy of the dead. One of his
mm,
favorite. He's basically saying too, don't judge the past on superficial things, right? I mean, you know,
mm,
women used to wear corsets, therefore, whatever. That's not
mm-hmm,
that's not really valid, right? So like it might say something about vanity, maybe, but not even
mm-hmm.
necessarily. But you can't necessarily look at the past and like the part about the crossbows he has in here, which
Yes,
he says, I got to read it because everyone else, we'll link this in the description too, so that you can read it too.
yes, it's in the middle of the second paragraph.
Right. If somebody suggests that it is rather better to deal with faithful people than with faithless ones, says Chesterton, we are told solemnly that that sort of fidelity belongs to the age of crinolines, which is exactly like saying that the notion of telling the truth belongs to the age of crossbows. On that assumption, there seems nothing to be said except so much the better for the age of crossbows. I love it. I love it. But I get really upset when people say that, the people in the past were dumber, for instance, because they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
computers. And I'm like, well, have you looked at Notre Dame? that was made without a
Right.
computer. Like, have you experienced the artwork and the science and the thinking that happened during periods in the past that we don't even we don't even value today? Yeah, so
Right. Yeah, and that was part of his point in The Everlasting Man, is that,
mm,
it's clear that we're not really smarter than our caveman any more than we were smarter than our grandparents.
right.
And so, but to elevate these sort of external things to some sort of moral thing, like
Mm,
perhaps we'd like to imitate the values of our grandparents, but that doesn't mean we all have to wear 50s housecoat frocks in order to be able to imitate those values. That's an
right.
external thing. So maybe I can wear pants, which Chesterton called just two skirts on the legs. He's like, what does it matter? Like he
Right.
had no opinion about the moral nature of women's clothing. He was not scolding or shaming people about their dress. And I don't know that I think that it's great that we want to harken back or we want to admire virtues about the past, but sometimes people, with very good intentions can mistake some of the principles for some of
Mhm.
the more fashionable things. And I love the fact that Chesterton points that out. So, but we haven't really talked about hospitality yet, which is, his title is The Extension of the Family. Later, he's going to argue that's hospitality, but in a very Chestertonian fashion, we're talking about other things that have been
Mhm.
brought to mind by,
And in a
these two.
this is a very typical sort. This is I can think of whole. I've been a part of a local society for over 10 years too, and this
Mm-hmm.
is one of those things that happens. You go down these rabbit holes, and sometimes that's okay. And you
Mm-hmm.
spend the entire time talking about, what is modesty, and let's talk about that because we just get stuck on the first paragraph, and that's okay if that's the way that it's genuinely going to go.
It
But
is.
let's definitely get further down though, because this is a great essay.
It is. So, I think at the beginning of the fourth paragraph, he says, he's talking about the extension of the family, which is a phrase that Miss Shackleton used. And it says it does not mean that the family should be broken or loosened or scattered among all the people in the street. It means that the family should really extend, that it should have the power to extend itself. And I think that that's a very important distinction. What he's arguing against is collectivism.
Hmm.
So Chesterton, along with Catholic social teaching, sees family as the basic unit of society, whereas some collectivist models see the individual as the basic unit of society, and then different groups can care for that. That could be the public schools, or the idea that it takes a community or takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And and I think Chesterton would welcome the support of the village,
Hmm.
but he doesn't want to throw the kid out into the village. That he wants the kid to be securely in a home, ideally with a mother and a father and siblings, and to be for that to be the basic unit. And so that's first. Chesterton says, if we're going to extend the family, we got to have a family.
Hmm.
So that, I mean, I would agree. And he says later on in that paragraph, this is his humor, and you may call it the extension of the home to make all its children homeless.
Ah.
but weakening the home and pouring all its material into clubs and hotels is not extending the home unless exile be extension.
Hmm.
Very good point there. And I think that primacy of the family is just a point that's echoed throughout all of Chesterton's writing. Something that's very instructive for us, because I think we've been so inculcated with this idea of society caring for all the basic needs of children that sometimes it's difficult to see where that primacy of the family and the principle of subsidiarity have been usurped.
Hmm.
So sometimes reflecting on Chesterton's writing can help to take it out of the common context and make it more universal, because these things were happening in England in the beginning of the 20th century, and now in America in the 21st century. I can see
Hmm.
parallels and the similar types of ideas and issues.
Yeah, and it's really a backwardness, right? I mean, so Chesterton is expressing how it should be. I think we
Mm-hmm.
can safely say, like you said, with the family at the center and everything kind of coming out from there, as opposed to the individual at the center. And because we're human beings and we were made for community and relationship, being an individual as an island doesn't actually work, right? So,
Mm-hmm. Right.
so what happens is we end up needing all of these institutions if we don't have the strong family structure that is providing them naturally, right?
Exactly.
So he's just kind of pointing that out in a way that makes you say like, oh yes, that hits me, that makes sense to me. Yeah, and I love how there's one part where he talks about not breaking down the walls of the home. Do you know what I'm talking
Yes.
about? Where is it? Let me see if I can find it.
That's on the second page as you printed off the Chesterton Digital Library, the top of the first second full paragraph.
How's the paragraph start there?
But the cure for a stuffy house is to open the windows, not
Love
knock down the walls.
that.
I love that. I love that. And
Mhm.
that's where we first hear the word hospitality is in the paragraph above. It says the real extension of the home is something that will sound very new because it is really very old. The germ of it can be described in the ancient and familiar word hospitality.
Mm,
And so this is the idea of doors. They were once made to be open, and now they're chiefly made to be shut.
mm,
So this home, man's castle, the woman's the domestic empress, running things in the home, was a place that had these walls so that it could be a defined space to bring people in.
right,
And he doesn't want to knock down the walls. We have to keep the home. And if we're going to have hospitality, if not, where are we going to have this hospitality?
right.
I
Well,
see this as an issue today. I wonder, especially post COVID. I mean, I don't even like
mm,
to say that word, but you know, what are we doing in our society to create this connectedness, to bring people close together, and
mm,
to be able to provide hospitality? I think some people have been so afraid of that interconnectedness because they're afraid of getting sick or they're afraid of, they want to protect themselves and other people. Very good motivations behind that, but there's something lost.
mhm,
And so that's part of my goal too with local societies is to help people see that hospitality is a Christian virtue. And
mm,
it is something, it's a Christian virtue, it's a secular virtue, it's something that needs to be rediscovered.
mhm,
And one of the many ways we can rediscover that is through arts and culture, and Chesterton local societies fit right into that. I mean,
mm,
there's plenty of other ideas out there, but this is one way to meet like-minded people who understand the value of keeping culture alive and community, and those local connections, because tyranny can only flourish when people are not interconnected. I
mm,
think we saw that even when there were tyrants running part of Eastern Europe and things like that, and in those local societies, those local people, those local underground networks that could save people's lives and keep people sane, and even provide the mass when it was illegal.
mhm,
These things are even going on today in Middle Eastern countries. There's places where the church is kept alive in an underground kind of way.
yeah,
So I think these connections are vital, in a way that we can provide the type of life we want for our families, regardless of what's going on in the geopolitical realm.
mm,
Which is one of the great things about Chesterton societies is we can get away from politics and we
mhm,
can talk about principles,
yeah,
because Chesterton didn't have any opinions about 21st century American politics, and thanks
right.
be to God, because we can talk about that in lots of places,
Yes.
and we can type until our fingers bleed, and we can have a little internet war, and this is a respite from that. This
Yes.
is a place where people of all persuasions can come together to talk about timeless truths and to find areas of commonality
Yes.
without having to wave the flag of their particular political candidate, who
Right.
may not even be who they think they are. Who knows? It doesn't matter though, because it's Chesterton didn't
Right.
have an opinion about any of that.
Yeah.
So
No, and it's
yay.
and I love that you bring this up too, because like I don't know how diverse your Chesterton Society is.
Mm-hmm.
We have all kinds of people from different walks of life. One guy that I'm thinking of is a Mennonite, and
Mm,
he drives like over an hour to come, and sometimes he'll bring his students, and
oh, wonderful.
it is, and it's so like it's just so incredible to me that there's so much we have in common. Like I think I have more in common with you than like the Lutherans down the street. I'm sure we have some things in common with them, but like you seem because it's funny. You look at it. I'm in Amish country here in Pennsylvania, but
Mm-hmm,
so we're very aware of these people who are living among us who are very separatist and different looking even.
mm-hmm,
They grow the beards, they wear the different clothes, but oh my gosh, so many commonalities in family values mostly,
mm-hmm.
and what is actually true and fundamental about humanity. They
Yes.
really good at that. And it's kind of a beautiful sort of cross community bridging too, because
Mm-hmm.
we talk about families, and then also there's different communities, and it's really great to be able to say, hey, we have these things in common, and it's not just like we both like the color blue or something super superficial.
Right.
We both believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and this is what a family means, and like all these things that are actually real. We can say together we believe in these things, and we would not have known that if it wasn't for our Chesterton Society. So I
Oh,
don't know.
that's beautiful.
It
And it
is.
really humanizes people.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem with our soundbite culture and with this, it it almost feels like certain folks might want to put us in different camps so that we would, be against each other so we wouldn't see what they were doing.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's like no, I have more in common with my neighbor. And that's another thing. Oh, I love this part where he's talking about neighbors. He says,
Yeah.
and this is great. He's talking, of course, about the early 20th century, and he says, the narrowness and dullness of domesticity, as described in so many recent plays and novels, was due not to an old tradition, but to a new fashion, and
Mm.
a fashion that was rather peculiar to the suburbs of modern industrial cities. It was not due to the ancient and normal conception of a man talking to his family. It was due to the new and nasty conception of a man not talking to his neighbors.
Mm.
It was due to quite modern types of snobbishness, to the exclusiveness of small social pretensions, to keeping to oneself, to nomadic habits and new surroundings. I'm guilty of this. We moved like three
Mm.
times in the last decade. To
Mm.
the exclusiveness of to the loss of the old patriotism of the parish and paternal quality of the parish church, to the mean mercantile fear of knowing impecunious people, in short, to all the essentially modern evils of the outskirts of industrialism.
Mm.
Ouch.
Yeah.
You know, that's a real indictment of what
Yeah.
modern culture's done to the community. And I think how much more has the information revolution,
Mm.
which followed the industrial revolution, created this sense of isolation.
Mm.
I look with shame at my statistics on my iPhone of how
Mm.
many hours a day I've used this terrible device, and I think, what what percentage of that have I spent with my neighbors?
Right. Right.
A shamefully small percentage of the time that I've spent interacting online,
Mm.
with people who are right next door to me. So
Mm.
it's definitely a point for an examination of conscience, and I think one that I routinely fail. So,
Oh, yeah.
so so we have to create opportunities to invite our neighbors in.
Mhm.
Again, local societies becoming more involved in a parish,
Mhm.
which should be like a family.
Mhm.
But for how many of us is it something that lasts about an hour?
Mm.
Or father gets in trouble because it went too long, and then and then we leave, and then we come
Yeah.
back in another week for another hour, and retire immediately to our football game or our nothing wrong with football games, but how much of the community are we fostering in these different environments? I think Chesterton's right to give us a little list of areas we can examine our involvement in our local community, our
Mm.
neighbors, our parish. These
Right.
are important.
And I think there's a subtle call there to look beyond transactions. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're so encouraged in our society to use people in a
Mm-hmm.
transactional way.
Yes.
From the little things to the really, really big important things. It's like, well, networking. I kind of hate that word.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what can this person do for me? Even what can and in a sense, it's good to be able to help each other in those ways. But that shouldn't be our only mode of interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to get at there, but it seems like there's a real sort of, again, subtle and beautiful and charitable condemnation of that transactional nature that is kind of a what's that amazing phrase he uses? Uh, one of the modern evils of the outskirts of industrialism. Oh, that's so good. Um,
Right.
it's true. We need to look at people as people, and what are your real concerns about? Like,
Right.
because our neighbors, even sometimes, even I think we interact with our neighbors like, oh, I'm going away. Can you pick up packages for me or whatever? It's like, again, there's just so much more there that is important. I remember we became really good friends with a next door neighbor. He's since moved away, but he was just an older gentleman living by himself, and at one night we heard all kinds of loud noises from his house, loud music, and it went on like all night.
Mm.
So we were like,
Okay.
"Is this guy dead?" Like, because we really thought maybe he left a stereo on and like had a heart attack in his house or something. Um, so we just knocked on the door like the next day, and he came to the door and he was fine.
Mm-hmm.
He just had a project and literally pulled an all nighter, um,
Okay.
which is unusual for him. But it was one of those deals where, like, if we hadn't really gotten to know him, maybe we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have even been concerned. Maybe we wouldn't have noticed that. It was a moment of real connection. Like, we'd had a lot of moments of real connection with him, but because of that, there was a facilitation there of like, oh, I actually do care about you. I want
Yes.
I want to make sure that you're okay. I know we know that you care about us, you care about our kids, and there was a reality to that interaction that, to be honest, we've had trouble getting with newer neighbors that we've had. It's just not been the same kind of connection. But yeah, I don't know. Connect with your neighbors.
It's something so important,
Yeah.
I happen to be in, our homes are a little bit spread out in our neighborhood, and I happen to go to swimming classes at our local gym, and my neighbors went, and it was
Mm,
great. And while we were talking, our kids are, not really swimming; they're just mostly floating in the pool, and we're talking, I mentioned block parties. I grew up in a
mm,
the urban setting in a city, and we would have block parties. They were phenomenal, and it was really multicultural. It was like our own little taste of Chicago, but in the suburbs of Chicago. So, we would have, pancit, and we'd have empanadas, and we'd have, you
mm.
know, sauerkraut and kielbasa. I mean, it was just this great, and we'd bring like chili or something boring, but it was great. And the fire trucks would show up and they block off the street. And so, you know, uh, thanks be to God, the neighbors put flyers in everybody's mailbox, and we had a block party, and we got people's phone numbers, and we're starting to have more of a community. And but it's like these structures many times have gone away, and we need to find our ways to open up the walls. So how are we going to knock down the walls? And I think Chesterton just gives me hope, because he's not an all or nothing kind of guy.
Yeah.
He points out these different areas, and then I feel like, well, what's one small thing that I could do after reading this essay, that would get me a little bit closer to where I want to be, not in a fashionable kind of way, but in a very principled kind of way.
Yes.
How does his philosophy reflect the Christian philosophy? And then to what extent can this help me get closer to my neighbor, get closer to our Lord? I see in his writing, this was something he wrote for a weekly
Mm.
newspaper. He wasn't moralizing. This
No.
isn't a Sunday school lesson, but throughout his writing, I find some way that I can more closely exemplify the Christian ideal, because that was ultimately his goal. Even though he wasn't uh, mentioning things in a preachy way, I think
Right.
it's the genius of Chesterton. People are attracted to the truth of the gospel, even when they don't know that that's what they're consuming.
Mm,
It's a beautiful thing.
mm,
So, and I
amen.
love the last section of that, that penultimate paragraph there. It says, hospitality, the most ancient of human virtues, may appear again in the last days to meet the most modern of social problems. And men once more remember that Zeus is the protector of the stranger, as they did in the morning of the world.
Mm,
Wow. I mean, you have people, every generation has thought it's the last one. There's always been prognosticators and, oh, the end is coming. Well, the end is coming for me for sure in the next 60 years. So
right.
that's my eschatology. I don't get too much more into it,
Yeah.
but even with, some people are concerned about social unrest or inflation or these types of
Mm,
problems. Well, the answer, of course, is hospitality. The answer, of course, is being friends with your neighbor. If you lose power for a couple of days, wouldn't it be great to be able to work together with your neighbors, to check in on your older neighbor who may not have air conditioning and provide them comfort or care.
mm,
So this is great advice, even when it's not, the end of the age. We
mm.
don't have to like
Yeah,
it'll be handy then.
yeah,
He points out that it would
right.
be very handy in the last days. But
Mm.
aren't we all kind of in the last days, regardless of
Well,
when we're born?
yeah, this is a good, this is the meaning of the memento mori, right? It's not
Right,
remember you will die because morbid skulls and crossbones and goth stuff. Like it's remember
right.
you will die so that you live, right? So
Hey,
when you
amen.
when you get there, are you going to be really happy that you spent a bunch of time on your phone? Or are you going to be really happy that you spent a bunch of time with your kids and your neighbors? Like these are the things that's meant to bring to mind is what's really
A-
important? What are we really striving for? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, was there anything else from the essay? I
You
like
know,
the last sentence.
yeah,
It's so much there. I could read the whole thing.
I know. Well, at this point, would you mind just reading the last bit there?
Sure.
Yeah,
It
just
says, that is the normal and dignified manner of mixing with the world,
mm,
the way which leaves a certain responsibility, at once creative and vigilant, in the manner in the maker and master of the feast, and bids him, as in the parables and the nursery rhymes, to call in his neighbors to be his friends.
mm, yay.
Yay!
That is
So
local societies.
that is local societies, and that's what we as Christians are called to do in our larger society. And so many levels and so many ways to take this essay into your heart and into your mind. And again, if anyone out there is interested in a local society, I encourage you to pray about it. I encourage you to discern, to ask your friends, and then, send me an email. There's a form on the chesterton.org website that'll get you straight in touch with me,
Mm,
and we will be happy to do whatever we can.
mm,
We believe in the principle of subsidiarity. So each local society is its own organization. We're just there to provide support that we can. Those things that can't be done at the local level, but
mm.
you
Amen.
know,
And if I can put a little plug too, it's not hard. you know, Vicky used to say, if it's you and one other person, that's great. And if it's just you, you get to read Chesterton and then go home. Like
right?
so, just to put it out there, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be 10, 20 people every time. Just
Oh no,
come together. Whoever comes, come together and enjoy Chesterton and share Chesterton with each other.
absolutely. In fact, I found, you have one other person,
Hmm.
that's your Paul and Timothy, and there you go. And then you can do whatever, and just start it.
Mm,
Find a regular time. That's the big thing.
yeah.
People need to know when it's going to be there, because everybody's so busy. So you have people that are faithful, but they may only be able to attend 6 out of 12 meetings a year, but the meetings need to stay regular. So
Mhm.
it is a commitment, but it's a commitment to about 12 2-hour meetings a year. The
Yeah.
prep time is reading whatever material, sending out a couple emails. So
Yeah.
This is not, it is a commitment, but it's not something that's too
Yeah.
much for most people
You can do
seeking to be hospitable. You can do it.
You can
Yes,
do
we
it.
encourage you. Yes,
Yeah. And I mean, we just had a great meeting, and there's just two of us, so you can do it. Um,
beautiful.
yeah. Well, any last words of wisdom, Susan, before we sign off here?
Oh, I think Chesterton's had all the words of wisdom for today. I think we've exhausted it all in what he's written. So, again, I'm so happy to be with the society. I'm so happy to be a part of an apostolate that is trying to do the will of God and to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ through the works of G.K. Chesterton. I think this is needed. He's a prophet for our times.
Mm.
And so we are really excited to be, I'm really excited to be a part of this. The people are phenomenal.
Mm.
I just, it's great to show up to work virtually. Uh, you know,
Yes.
part
Yeah.
time has been. I love my coworkers and I love the job that we're doing. So grateful to be on board.
We are really happy to have you, Susan. It's great to see you every day, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you so much for joining me right now and having this lovely discussion, and hopefully encouraging some people out there to take that extra leap. Like, have a local society if you don't have one, and if not, go join one. And if you are part of one, good for you. Keep it going. It's great. It's wonderful. This is how we do it. This is how we change the world. So, well, again, thank you, Susan. It's been really great.
Yes. Thank you so much, Grettelyn.
Wonderful. And for all of you out there, if you want to be notified of when we put out new videos, feel free to subscribe, hit that bell button. Please give us a like and or a comment. We really do like to hear from our listeners. And spread this around. If you have somebody that you think needs to see this video, hear this message, please share it with them. We really want to go wide here because, as we know, Chesterton is always better with friends. Thank you so much, and God bless you.